Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today we want to talk about a very important topic, disinformation. Disinformation is what we regard one of the most challenging topics of our present time, and it's a very important part to understand disinformation if you want to understand the broad importance of media literacy. Our guest is Miroslava Sawiris. She's our guest in regarding her expertise. She can offer us a lot of new insights. And I will be our host, so the Center for Digital Media Literacy, but I'm very glad that I'm not alone. The president of Vienna Goes Europe is joining me today in our discussion.
Yes, hello, I'm Kati Schneeberger, president of Vienna Goes Europe, and we're glad to have you here. I joined today as a listener, and I'm already curious to hear more about your work.
So please, Miroslava, could you introduce yourself? Could you introduce the broad spectrum of your work and tell us what actually GLOBSEC is, this international think tank you work for?
Mm-hmm. So first of all, thank you very much for having me, and I'm pleased to having this opportunity to speak in your podcast. So my name is Miroslava Sawiris. I work as a research fellow for Democracy and Resilience program at the GLOBSEC Policy Institute. So GLOBSEC Policy Institute is just one part of GLOBSEC that is, as you have mentioned, Dietmar, an international think tank organization that is mainly known for its large international political conference that is GLOBSEC Forum, which we organize each year. This year is going to happen between 15th and 17th of June, so in a quite short time, and it's quite an ambitious undertaking, obviously, regarding the circumstances, and also for another conference, which is Tatra Summit, that is dealing more with economic issues and topics. So GLOBSEC is essentially trying to provide platform for leading representatives of different kind of state institutions, private sector, civil society, to basically facilitate discussions of the most important issues of the day.
Which brings me to my second question. I saw that you already published a couple of articles and studies around the topic of disinformation, and I would like to know, what are the key findings? What is not only your personal opinion, but what do you think is new about your work compared to previous analytics we saw in the last 10 years?
So what we do at GLOBSEC, we monitor disinformation or even other malign phenomena in the information space from several points of view. One way is basically to monitor the internet, monitor the information space in order to see how is disinformation created, how is it distributed, who distributes it, what are the networks that distribute it, how does it get to the people, and then in the end, how does it influence them? And in order to measure how disinformation impacts people and people's opinions on various things, we then conduct representative public opinion poll surveys, where you can essentially test whether certain narratives that are being promulgated in the information are taken on board by public at large. So, for example, our recent GLOBSEC trends from 2020, we were monitoring COVID-19 related conspiracy theories across 9 different states in Central Europe, as well as Western Balkans. And this year's GLOBSEC trends that we are literally writing as we speak, which will be published by the beginning of June, will again look at some of the most typical COVID-19 related conspiracy theories, and also on the way how they can affect, for example, potential of populations and willingness of populations to get vaccinated, because specific example, if you have 30% of population who thinks that COVID-19 is fake, you will have a massive issue with actually persuading people to get vaccinated against COVID-19. So these are mostly right now the most important issues related to disinformation that we're studying, because obviously disinformation related, I'm not going to say that all the other types of disinformation or information operations are not important, but at the moment this is crucial because we're trying basically worldwide to overcome this massive disaster. So focusing on this type of disinformation is at the moment, we'll again get back to monitoring also, you know, other disinformation narratives and harmful phenomena.
You mentioned COVID-19 and you are from Slovakia. So there is one thing that comes into my mind, and this is the whole situation with Sputnik V. So we have this Russian vaccine and it's a highly political issue. And I had a discussion with one woman, and she works for the European Union in foreign relations, I think for the for the foreign relation unit, so not for the parliament or for the commission. And she said that the disinformation connected to Sputnik V, actually launched even by the Sputnik V Twitter channel, is very remarkable and not easy to ignore. So what are your experiences in Slovakia? Because today we heard that also in Brazil there are issues, especially if we take a look at the quality of the actual vaccine.
Mm-hmm. So in Slovakia, basically Sputnik V has caused political crisis, you know, even before we were able to actually use it. So we look at it from the perspective of it being used in this kind of vaccine diplomacy wars, which are currently being by Russia and China. And this is just like a new iteration of the personal protective equipment diplomacy that we have seen in the first wave of the pandemic. So it's used as a great, you know, other than for business interests, obviously, it's also used as a great propaganda tool in countries which are already susceptible to pro-Russian influence. Now, I'm not going to be judging the quality of Sputnik V because that's not something I can actually, you know, judge. I'm not an expert on vaccination, so that's not something that I am qualified to do. That's something that specialists at the European Medicines Agency or specialists at national equivalent to the European Medicines Agency can do. But what we can say outside of its health parameters is that that Sputnik V has been utilized as a part of the tool in a hybrid warfare, essentially from the Russian side. Had it been processed through the standard process of vaccine approval, this issue would not be politicized in the first place. So it really boils down to this. And when we speak about Sputnik, it is important to also place it in a broader context of what is currently going on in the region, in Central Europe. When we look at for example, the attack in Vrbietice, which caused, diplomatic upheavals across Central Europe. When we look at the recent militarization on the Ukrainian border, all of these elements are sort of different aspects of policy and its interests in the region. It's effective in Slovakia because in Slovakia we have a population that is very sympathetic to Russia and is idealizing the current Russian administration. So for some people in Slovakia, like it's 15% adult Slovak trustworthy vaccine in their opinion. So this is why these kind of campaigns work in Slovakia.
And when you talk about state actors as the source of this information, do you think that Russia is the main actor worldwide in spreading disinformation, also in creating disinformation, other countries? And why do we discuss the whole topic sometimes in Western Europe, as it is something that is given, that is, I mean, sometimes in Western Europe it seems, or also in Austria, that people think disinformation is something only connected to Donald Trump, and they do not even have any idea what the troll factory in St. Petersburg is, and all these kind of disinformation, the whole Soviet school of disinformation, because it's not something that is actually new. It's, if you take a look at old papers and old propaganda materials, it was very similar what they did in the 80s or especially 70s.
Yes, absolutely. Well, the word disinformation is, allegedly basically invented by Stalin. So you're quite right pointing out these similarities and the fact that the Kremlin's playbook is not new. It's something that is basically, I'd say, a process which has been developed for decades, as you said. But to go back to your first question, is Russia the only country spreading disinformation? Absolutely not. State actors sponsor disinformation campaigns. We see them everywhere, essentially. Any country with geopolitical ambitions and even can spread disinformation campaigns outside, directed at other countries, but also against their own population. So regularly you will see disinformation campaigns directed against their own populations in countries which are non-democratic. But we also know of this in Saudi Arabia or Iran or plenty of other countries which basically use it as another tool of gaining influence by non-standard means, let's put it this way.
Could you mention a couple of countries? Because recently I was asked which country in Europe does it best in conquering disinformation. I said it's not a matter of who is the best, it's the matter of who is the worst, because I think Europe as a whole is not prepared. We, in my opinion, we are a little bit better than we were in 2014. I guess you remember it all started with Sochi. It did not start with the Euromaidan, it started with Sochi and this whole homophobic policy by Russia, and then a lot of politicians decided not to go to the, not to join the Olympic Games, and then the propaganda war started actually, and it was much bigger than it was the years before. And Ukraine was also, I think, a huge starting point of the disinformation. And in my opinion, the European Union was not prepared, and especially countries like Austria not prepared at all. It was very easy to influence people with propaganda. And who is the best actually in Europe not believing the propaganda, not only the Russian propaganda, but because if we take a look at countries like Poland, the Russian disinformation is not really spreading there, but there is a lot of other disinformation and non-scientific views. Yeah, what do you think? Who does it best?
I think countries which are in the north of Europe and which geographically are positioned in a close vicinity towards Russia are much more experienced and much more accustomed to open their eyes to this phenomenon much earlier than the rest of Europe, as you correctly pointed out. So that would be the Baltic states and perhaps also Sweden, Finland, have different ways of fighting disinformation. You know, people in Baltic states are also not, you know, scared of simply turning off the Sputnik news, essentially, which in other countries may seem quite a radical solution. But then you have countries like Finland and Sweden, where you have sort of whole of society strategies implemented, which link, you know, media literacy, and which link developed state institutions, which link strategic communication capabilities at every level of state. So these are, you know, these are great examples from which we can all learn from. For example, in Slovakia, what we've done recently, what my colleagues have done, is that they've taken some examples from a sort of handbook on strategic communication from Swedish institutions, translated it and accustomed it to Slovak context, essentially, and then distributed this handbook to Slovak public institutions, because some of the steps that they have taken in order to build resilience against disinformation are actually quite easily implemented. Some of them obviously require massive reforms, particularly reform of education system, if you really want to build up the critical thinking capabilities that are in the end like the most important thing when you want to build resilience of the populations towards disinformation. But obviously that's a hard work, and that's a work that takes decades to bring some fruit. Because in Slovakia, what we see from our public opinion poll surveys is also that often it's not the youngest people who are susceptible to disinformation. Often it's the older generation, you know, or people in the V4, it's interestingly the generation of people between 35 and 45 years old and a bit older. So, you know, so, or 45 to 54, like the middle-aged kind of group that really is the most prone to believe in disinformation and conspiracy theories. I'm not saying that the others are not. I'm just saying that in this particular age group, you have higher propensity.
Yeah, thank you very much. You mentioned already a lot of very important things that will lead me to what I want to say now. Yeah, we as the Center for Digital Media Literacy, we basically work with companies. So we educate employees. This is our attempt, because we want to reach a lot of people, not only experts. So the PR unit, it's nice. We a lot of times we train experts. What is not actually what our mission is about, but it's what is happening in a practical way, because companies also do not understand how, very often, many do already, but many companies do not understand how important it is to have employees that are media literate, that do not share hate speech, do not share the disinformation, because it makes a lot with the reputation of their company, of their organization, and of their also personal reputation. And this is our attempt. So we want to give it a little bit of a business touch, so they can do something, they can give something back. Yeah, we have corporate social responsibility. So companies should not only contribute in things like the environment, but also into media literacy. I think this is something which we need to build up. So this is our mission, and it's at least a full-time job. So it can't be a hobby what you do in your spare time. And I think the challenge is that we need to understand that we have to educate all people. It's not about some experts. It's not about journalists. Even they have problems, and they share a lot what is not true. But as you mentioned, the education system, and you also mentioned the elder generation is the ones who are not in school anymore. What do you think we could do actually when we take a look at the next generation, when you take a look what's happening in schools? Yeah, is there a chance that we can implement very quick a kind of overall training, like we do. We have a 2 hours training. It sounds like nothing, but if you educate the people, if you tell them, they say, I understand it, I understand. I never thought about it, but I know exactly what you mean. And if you have this reaction, then you have a lot of different awareness than before. But what I realized, and also Kati is a teacher and she knows what is happening in schools, that a lot of time when teachers are not very educated in a topic or they're not very familiar with it, then they decide to better not talk about it. It's not in the education plan. What can we actually do to implement this kind of education as a whole society education so that everybody heard about it and has the basics, so this main basics like a driving license. Yeah, your opinion.
I totally agree with your idea, and I'm really impressed by hearing what you're developing in terms of this corporate social responsibility and training people to understand that disinformation is not some kind of a unrelated issue, but actually, yes, it touches your life, it touches your business if you have one, it is related to your education. So this is, I think you almost mentioned the answer in my opinion, because yes, for example, in Slovakia, we need to actually include media literacy lessons, or I would even call it lessons on digital citizenship, to understand the notion that the citizenship does not end in the offline world, that once you are online, whatever you're typing, wherever you're communicating with somebody, you need to have a basic morals, let's say, basic integrity, basic way also to protect yourself, because we know there are lots of dangers online. So kind of this comprehensive package that we can, deliver to young people. And as you said, it doesn't even need to be so time consuming, you can have a couple of lessons per week, and that's not really so difficult to put in place. Sometimes, as you mentioned, with the teachers in Slovakia, for example, we have this issue that some of the teachers actually recommended disinformation and conspiracy spreading outlets to their pupils because they considered them to be legitimate sources of information. So sometimes the issue is that the problem again, is with the older generation, which already has been to some extent affected by this issue, and these people need to be retrained. And then in terms of reaching out to people who are already in employment, this is exactly something that can be done through corporate social responsibility. We have similar projects in Slovakia, which started as civil society initiatives, but basically which deal with disinformation from this perspective. So I'll give you an example. So you have, for example, a car company whose advertising is placed on a web page of conspiracy spreading outlet, and that actually damages the brand of this company, because they don't want to be associated with disinformation, or they don't want to be associated with COVID-19 spreading conspiracy theories. So it's not even like, sometimes it's not even about social responsibility. Sometimes it's really about just protecting your brand. And so what was developed in Slovakia is a project called conspirators.sk, and that's a sort of online web page where you have board members that rank problematic outlets that people suggest to them. I'm actually a member of this board. So every month I receive a bunch of websites and I rank them based on whether they, comply with basic journalistic standards, whether they publish disinformation, whether they publish hate speech, etc. And then once they are on the list, advertisers can choose whether they want to advertise on these outlets or they want to adopt the script, which would basically simply resolve this issue for them, because then their ads would be just placed on websites which are not problematic. So projects such as these, are, I think, very good idea of moving forward. But first of all, yes, you need to raise awareness around the issue. But I also think people are much more aware, like you said, than they were in 2014. I remember that in 2014, it was literally a bunch of individuals who were kind of warning against this massive threat that information warfare poses to our countries and to our democracies. But by now, you know, even on a European level, people are aware. You have the Digital Services Act coming up, basically, which is right now being negotiated. You have the European Democracy Action Plan, and one of its pillars is basically strengthening good quality journalism across European Union, which is one important pillar of this issue that we're discussing. And the other pillar is basically fighting against disinformation. So steps are being taken, and some people may think they are slow, but also you don't want to adopt legislation on disinformation or hate speech, which could, you know, impact freedom of speech. So it's a very tricky balance that we need to navigate, but things are definitely happening. So I am quite optimistic that things will improve in the digital sphere for the better in the upcoming 5 years, I'd say.
Thank you. That was very helpful, because that led me once again to my next question. Freedom of speech is something that we consider one of the most important European values, or at least European Union values. And there is one thing that there is a lot of discussion in Austria, Germany, and I guess in a lot of other European countries. How responsible are social networks? Are they actually media? Are they maybe a technical tool, or are they something in between? Are they responsible for their content? And recently this one journal, international journal, made an interview with me, and they asked me about my opinion. And I said, I think there's something in between, because if you, for instance, publish there and you say Facebook is very bad, then you are publishing that. It's not Mark Zuckerberg who does it. Yeah, so he's providing the platform. On the other hand, of course, the platforms need to take more responsibility. There is this way that disinformation, which is checked by fact checkers, is gray, so you cannot view it. You have to push it, and there is an information that is disinformation. So there's something happened. Maybe it's not very accurate or not always precise. And then we have the issue that Donald Trump's Twitter account and Facebook account is offline. I'm a little bit critical about it, because we, as the Center of Media Literacy, we have this vision that I'm not talking about terrorism or any extremely radical stuff, but in general, we have the vision that the user, the so-called digital citizen, is so aware, is so educated and critical that the whole propaganda and disinformation is not lethal anymore, because it cannot be, it does not spread anymore, because people are aware this is, I use the word bullshit, yeah, hard word, but it's so that it cannot spread. It's not viral anymore. Yeah, it's not lethal. You have this European digital citizen, and no matter how much propaganda and how much disinformation or fake news you put into our countries, it has no certain effect. What is your opinion about it?
Mm-hmm. So to a great extent, I agree with you, but I'll start where I disagree with you. I'll start with the idea that one day we will have all citizenship so educated and so resilient to disinformation that it will not be an issue anymore. I think disinformation will always be an issue. It has always been an issue ever since people organized into political, basically, societies. It's been an issue in ancient times. But the question is, how much influence can this have as an information warfare tactic? We need to, it's now very mainstream and very influential, and we need to push it back to the fringes, kind of where it belongs. As humans, we have psychological biases, and in a way, we are also susceptible to disinformation, but you know, a good disinformation actor will know exactly what buttons they need to push in order to get you on board. So we see it with these pro-Russian campaigns, you know, they are targeted at specific type of people with specific experience, with specific mindset, you know, with specific persuasions. And these campaigns are targeted towards that. They target and exploit fears, prejudices, stereotypes that we've got. So it's very emotional, you know, and that's why often rational arguments, once somebody actually is on the other side, I would say, and is in that camp where they really believe, you know, and blindly follow certain conspiracy theories, often you will not be able to change their mind, because that belief gives them something, you know, emotional. It gives them perhaps the feeling that they are in the know and you are not. So there is a lot of, I think, psychological motivations that are just typical for us as humans. So the danger will always be there. But coming back to the digital platforms and their responsibility in this whole thing is that, as you said, they are not exactly media, but they are not exactly, they can't say that this is not their responsibility, because algorithms choose what content we see based on those profiles that they have compiled on us, you know, based on our activity online. So if the digital platform chooses the content that you see, for example, if you go on YouTube algorithm will offer you unlimited amount of videos that the algorithm has chosen for you. Are you the one that's choosing then, you know, or is it the digital platform that is choosing for you? And a lot of people have been radicalized this way through YouTube algorithm. I recommend podcast Rabbit Hole, which is basically one story of a man's, you know, leap into the world of conspiracy theories. So they, in other words, digital platforms have a huge responsibility, I think, for creating this crisis that we've got. And I don't want to sound like a tough critic of digital platforms, because I use them every day and I think they're great for so many things. And, you know, I am an avid user of digital platforms and I love using them. But there is this dark side to the whole system that they haven't quite acknowledged. I think European Union is really leading on this conversation with digital platforms to sort of up their game, and they have been trying to do that. But also when we're talking about content moderation, digital platforms need to develop and fine-tune their systems to be able to fight against this, because it's still not in such a shape that we could call efficient. So, for example, with Donald Trump, you know, I think that what happened there is that Donald Trump is not the main issue here. Donald Trump is just a product of a system that is not working, and digital platforms are just one aspect of that. But digital platforms consistently promote content that is dividing and polarizing, because this keeps people engaged on the platform for a long time. And the longer you're engaged on the platform, the more advertisements you see. So the more, more profit is created by that. So they have business interest in actually pushing the polarizing content. But we need to now find the balance between business interests of digital platforms and between, essentially survival of democracies. And that's the reasoning behind the European Democracy Action Plan and the Digital Services Act. And also, digital platforms, I think, are slowly also coming to terms with this, because in a way, in the absence of any regulation, they are the ones who are making very arbitrary decisions on who gets to say what on the platform, and they get to decide whether Donald Trump gets to stay on Facebook or not. And they do it in a very arbitrary way. And they are damned if they keep him on the platform, because a lot of people will criticize that. And they will be also criticized if they remove him from the platform. So it's a fight which they can't win. So I think they are now coming to terms to just find out that actually we need cooperation with independent institutions to develop systems that will, not stifle free speech, but that will not promote problematic content to vulnerable people at the same time. And just one last example. that I want to mention, even though I know I've been talking for a long time, is content moderation of even hate speech, you know, which is a basic thing, should be a basic thing in 21st century on a digital platform. I'm not sure about how it works on German language, but for example, Facebook's algorithms and AI systems moderating the content are not developed sufficiently enough to be able to actually recognize hate speech. So often what happens is that they take down content which is not hate speech and actual hate speech, Holocaust denial, things like that, you know, remains on the platform. So it's also about investing enough resources. And this is the true corporate social responsibility. You know, if you're doing business in a country where you have, let's say, 2.5 million users, then you also need to ensure that the services you're providing are covering for managing hate speech, for example, on your platform. So that's you know, my view of the outlines and the borders of where the digital platform's responsibility lies, and I think it's a big one and very important.
Thank you very much, Miroslava, Sawiris, for all the interesting insights and positions. And I think this is an excellent starting point into this broad topic. We could talk for hours, like you mentioned before, and the time is flying very fast, which is a good sign because it's a very interesting topic. And we would like to invite you to one of our summer talks. I discussed it recently with Kati. In next summer, this summer, we planned a couple of discussions, and we hope that we can, if the pandemic allows it, to arrange them into a real life situation. But we will see. We will see. If not, then we will like to welcome you again via Zoom. But I hope to see you soon in real life. Kati?
That would be great. Thank you for the invitation and for the very interesting chat today. I'd be happy to attend summer talks, and yes, let's hope it would be in person. That's such an, you know, interesting prospect, traveling to different countries. It seems impossible right now. So,
and we are not so far. We are in Vienna, so. But right now, even if you were in Vienna, we would have to do it via Zoom. So crazy times. But next time in person, we are still optimistic.
Fingers crossed.
Thank you very much for the interesting talk.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good evening.
Have a nice evening. Bye.
Bye.